Welcome back to Cityscape. This is part 2 of the story of Rockefeller. In part 1, we covered some major breakthroughs achieved by Rockefeller. Let's start this episode by reviewing them. Unlike most refineries who were throwing away their waste in a river, Rockefeller used his oil byproduct as gasoline to power his own refinery. He also used that waste to create other sellable goods such as petroleum jelly, tar, paraffin wax, chewing gum, etc. When pressed by price hikes from the railroad companies, Rockefeller noticed that the pipes he was using to transport oil inside his refinery can be used to deliver oil directly to the consumer. He essentially founded and streamlined the oil pipeline sector. One of the business magnates that gave Rockefeller huge discounts on oil shipments, by the way, was Cornelius Vanderbilt, founder of the Grand Central Station in New York City. Vanderbilt saw his profits erode as Rockefeller turned away from his trains for shipments and increasingly relied on his own pipelines. Standard Oil Trust allowed Rockefeller to centrally control the numerous companies he acquired across the United States. Many other companies would later follow that model. Lastly, Rockefeller horizontally and vertically integrated the oil industry by acquiring companies before and after the point of refinery, and then streamlined their operations. These efficiencies drove down the cost of oil from 30 to just 8 cents a gallon. In other words, Rockefeller made oil affordable to the masses. Standard Oil was practically invincible, owning 90% of the world oil market. The company's vast empire included 20,000 domestic wells, 4,000 miles of pipeline, 5,000 tank cars, and over 100,000 employees. It is important to state that Standard Oil's dominance was not solely achieved through Rockefeller's efficiency and ingenuity, but also through the many shady tactics and predatory schemes we covered in part 1. This would have consequences. Rockefeller had many critics which he mostly paid no attention to, but one person he should not have ignored was Ida Tarbell, an investigative journalist whose father was personally ruined by Standard Oil's predatory practices. In 1904, she published a book named The History of the Standard Oil Company. This book has been dubbed the greatest work of investigative journalism ever written. In it, she exposed all of the espionage, price rigging, secret deals, and other predatory tactics Rockefeller performed to consolidate the oil industry. The book created a public outcry, and at last, in 1911, the Supreme Court of the United States found Standard Oil in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. The court ruled that Standard Oil Trust originated in illegal monopoly practices and ordered it to be broken up into 34 new companies. These smaller companies would become names we are all familiar with today: BP, Amoco, Conoco, ExxonMobil, Chevron, and so on. The breaking up of the trust was not really necessary in my opinion, for Standard Oil was already losing market share to overseas competitors, and the kerosene industry was being disrupted by Thomas Edison's electric light bulbs. Anyway, Rockefeller held over 25% of Standard stock at the time of the breakup. He and all the other stockholders received proportionate shares in each of the 34 new companies. In the aftermath, the breakup actually proved more profitable for Rockefeller. The companies were worth more as pieces than they were when together. Rockefeller's net worth rose 5-fold. His personal wealth jumped to $900 million. That is a net worth of $400 billion today when adjusted for inflation. Rockefeller would withdraw from the business world after the breakup and focus his energies solely on philanthropy. The philanthropic stage of his life is often overlooked, but is seriously important. As we will see, the world we live in today is largely shaped by Rockefeller's philanthropic ventures. His contribution there is arguably more profound than Standard Oil. I also want to mention that Rockefeller's charitable giving started far prior to his professional philanthropy. When he got his first job as a bookkeeper at the age of 16, he gave 6% of his earnings to charity, as recorded in his personal ledger. By the time he was 20, his charity exceeded 10% of his income. The following list, therefore, is not exhaustive by any means. It simply covers a few major items. In 1882, two women were traveling around raising money for a small Baptist school they had established in Atlanta for African American women. At a church conference in Ohio, they were introduced to a Baptist businessman, John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller would visit the school 2 years later in 1884. He was so impressed that he settled a debt the founders had on a property and would continuously donate funds to the school. That school is Spelman College, the oldest black private college in the country. In 1900, Rockefeller partnered with William Rainey Harper and John Dewey to found the University of Chicago. Yep, Rockefeller is one of the founders of this great school. Rockefeller supplied what was then a small Baptist college with an initial funding of $600,000. He then got the privilege to see the small Baptist college turn into a world-class institution. Rockefeller would later say that the University of Chicago was the best investment he ever made. In 1901, he founded the Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research in New York City. It later changed its name to Rockefeller University in 1965. This school would also become an excellent academic institution, especially in the field of medical research, claiming a connection to 23 Nobel laureates. In 1909, he founded the Rockefeller Sanitary Commission, an organization that eventually eradicated the hookworm disease, which had long plagued rural areas in the South. 4 years later, in 1913, John D. gave birth to the Rockefeller Foundation to continue and expand the philanthropic work he had started. This organization, along with the Carnegie Foundation, would define modern philanthropy as we know it today. His son, John D. Rockefeller Jr., would greatly expand on his philanthropic work, funding Booker T's Washington Tuskegee College and Margaret Sanger's Planned Parenthood. Jr.'s most iconic contribution, however, is the Rockefeller Center in New York City, a commercial and cultural center enjoyed by millions every year. Now, before we go, let's look at some conspiracies regarding the Rockefellers. Many people believe that the world is run by a secret cabal, a group that consists of the elites from the commercial, entertainment, banking, and military centers. These people supposedly get together and decide the course the world should head towards. They are known under many names such as the Skulls and Bones, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission, the Bohemian Grove, the Club of Rome, etc. Their colloquial name, however, is the Illuminati. There are many families that are supposedly part of this group, but the two most well-known are the Rockefellers and the Rothschild. Since this is not an episode on the Rothschild, let's strictly take a look at the Rockefellers. There are certainly sufficiently strange facts that make you wonder how much power do the Rockefellers really have. British intelligence, with the help of the Rockefeller family, founded the Council on Foreign Relations in 1921, a political think tank many accuse of secretly running the world. 20 years later, the United Nations was built on land donated by John D. Rockefeller. The MTA, New York City's mass transit authority, is actually a private company started by Nelson Rockefeller, Rockefeller's grandson. Nelson would then become Vice President of the United States under Gerald Ford. Another of John D.'s grandsons, David Rockefeller, joined the Council on Foreign Relations in 1941 and was appointed as its director in 1949. David would go on to say many things that would fuel conspiracy theorists such as, some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal, working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world order, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it. David Rockefeller also said, "We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. That's quite a statement. So, do the Rockefellers rule the world? The short answer is no. The world is certainly influenced by powerful players and networks, but if one cannot even control the simple fatalities of nature such as aging and dying, how can a person or group rule the planet? The only thing a person has control over is their own mind, nothing else. Never forget this. The idea of a secret cabal running the world is actually more comforting than the truth. It implies order and leadership to some degree. The truth is a lot more scary. That is, the world is a rudderless ship, temporarily influenced by players who come and go, thus heading to a direction only God knows. There are certainly people trying to rule the world, but this is an instance where I'm not sure who to pity more, those who think others can rule the world, or those who actually try to do it. The conspiracy theorists and the so-called cabal have more in common than they realize. See you next time.